My brother stole the invention I spent 4 years developing, and my entire family stood and clapped like he built it from scratch. Now his business is falling apart, and they want my help. My name's Lacey Quinn, and this is how I stopped letting blood blind me. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Are you in the middle of the morning rush or on a late-night drive? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear everything that happened after I made the choice that changed everything. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I always felt like the backup plan. Nolan, my older brother by 3 years, was the golden child, varsity athlete, student council president, and later, the one with the sleek job in tech sales. I was the quieter one, the girl in the garage with goggles on, building tiny turbines out of cereal box motors and dreaming about clean energy solutions. Our parents, Jim and Marla, weren't bad people, but they were the type to praise achievements only when they could brag about them at book club or church picnics. Nolan gave them a highlight reel they could showcase. I gave them questions they didn't know how to answer. What's the carbon output of our neighborhood water system? Could we compost more efficiently? They called it cute. I called it purpose. By 27, I had finished my master's in environmental engineering and was deep into developing a prototype for a modular industrial waste filter. It was innovative, scalable, and, according to a small accelerator program I'd pitched to, worth exploring for real-world use. I called it ClearSync. One weekend, I came home for a family barbecue. Nolan was there, as usual, basking in the center of attention, wine in hand, parents on either side. Over grilled corn and burgers, Dad asked what I'd been working on. I hesitated, but I explained the basics of my filter, how it could help reduce pollutants in mid-sized factories by over 40%. Nolan asked a few pointed questions, more than usual, and even pulled out his phone, just to look something up. 2 months later, I got a LinkedIn notification. Nolan had been listed as a featured speaker at a regional Green Futures Business Summit. The title of his talk? Revolutionizing Waste Management with Modular Filtration. I clicked through, heart pounding. There it was, mock-ups that looked like my blueprints, buzzwords pulled straight from my pitch decks, and not a single mention of me. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he'd had a similar idea. But the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just similar. It was mine. Word for word, bolt for bolt. And the final nail? The summit footage. Nolan stood on stage, smiling like a game show host, saying, "This came to me during a family conversation. Sometimes, inspiration comes when you least expect it." I watched my parents in the front row, clapping like they were watching their son cure cancer. I was invisible, again, but not for long. At first, I didn't know what to do. Rage simmered under the surface, but it was buried under a heavier emotion: betrayal. This wasn't just an idea Nolan had borrowed. He had taken the blueprint of 4 years of my sweat, study, and sacrifice, and turned it into a spotlight moment for himself. And worst of all, my family helped him build the stage. I called my mom that evening. "Did you see Nolan's talk?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Oh yes, honey. Wasn't he incredible?" she gushed. "He said it was something you two had talked about. So smart of him to take your conversation and run with it." Run with it? He didn't run with it. He ran me over and kept going. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But inside, the hurt was real. It wasn't just that Nolan took my idea. It was that everyone else clapped while he did it. Over the next week, I researched everything he'd said at the summit. His company, Eco Forward, was a startup he'd launched using connections from his old tech job. The product, ClearFlow, was clearly a rebrand of my ClearSync design. It even had the same modular filtration system with the pressure adaptive valves I had filed a provisional patent on last year. But the patent hadn't been finalized yet. He'd gotten in first with a slightly tweaked design and filed under his name. Still, I wasn't going to fold. I went back through my records, emails, pitch decks, CAD drawings with timestamps, even a video I'd recorded during a prototype test, all dated before Nolan's summit speech. I needed to figure out what my next move was legally, but I also needed time to breathe. I took 2 days off from work and stayed with my friend Harper in Seattle. Harper had known me since college. She was the one person who always believed in my work without conditions. She listened as I poured it all out, how Nolan had taken the idea, how my parents had clapped like nothing was wrong, how I felt invisible in my own family. "You don't need their applause, Lacey," she said. "You need the truth on your side, and you have it." That stuck with me. When I got back to Portland, I scheduled a consultation with an intellectual property attorney. I handed over everything: documents, prototype logs, even screenshots of Nolan's speech next to my designs. The attorney raised an eyebrow. "This is more than enough to raise a challenge," she said, "especially if you can prove he had access to your designs through that family conversation." Meanwhile, I noticed Eco-Forward had started getting press. Local green business features, online write-ups, even a podcast appearance. And every time Nolan smiled and called himself an unexpected innovator, it made my stomach turn. But then something interesting happened. A reporter from one of the sustainability blogs that had covered Nolan's product reached out to me. She'd seen a comment I left on a discussion thread hinting at the plagiarism. She asked if I had anything to share. For a moment, I hesitated. Speaking up would mean going public. It would also mean directly accusing my own brother of stealing my work. But then I thought about all the women I knew who'd had their ideas dismissed, who were told to stay quiet for the sake of family harmony. I wasn't going to be one of them. I sent the reporter the files, every piece of proof, every quiet effort I'd made that no one clapped for. And then I waited. Because I wasn't just going to take back what was mine, I was going to make sure the world saw the truth behind the applause. The article dropped on a Thursday morning. I didn't expect the headline to hit as hard as it did. "Stolen Stream, the real mind behind Eco-Forward's breakthrough isn't who you think." My phone exploded within hours. Old classmates, former professors, even my ex-boss from the research lab I interned at junior year. The article was everywhere. The reporter had done her homework, lined up my CAD files, timestamps, even a comparison chart showing my ClearSync prototype side by side with Nolan's ClearFlow product. The comments section blew up. "Why does this always happen to women in STEM? The real inventor deserves recognition. He's finished if this is true." Nolan didn't respond at first. My family didn't either, but I could tell they had seen it. Mom texted a single line. "Why would you do this to your brother? No. Are you okay? No. Is this true?" Just immediate defense of him and implied shame directed at me. I didn't reply. I didn't need to explain myself to someone who never saw me unless I was helping Nolan shine. A few days later, a follow-up article emerged. This time, a former colleague of Nolan's from his old job came forward, said Nolan had mentioned a family tech genius and how he might use one of her designs as inspiration. The colleague even recalled seeing one of my drawings open on Nolan's laptop in a shared workspace before ClearFlow was ever a thing. That was the crack that broke it open. By the end of the week, 2 small investors in Eco-Forward had pulled out. A university tech journal issued a correction to an article naming Nolan the sole inventor. And then, the final blow. ClearFlow's patent filing was challenged, formally, by my attorney, citing evidence of misappropriation. That night, Nolan called me. First time in nearly 4 months. I let it ring twice before picking up. "You didn't have to go this far," he said. "Didn't I?" I replied calmly. "You knew it was mine." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "We could have worked together. This didn't have to be public." "Funny, you weren't thinking about that when you stood on stage and took credit for my design." He sighed. "You've humiliated me." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." He hung up. I stood there, phone still in my hand, heart racing, not with anxiety, but with clarity. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet sister in the corner of family dinners. I wasn't the backup, the helper, the footnote to someone else's legacy. I was the one who'd built something, and now the world finally knew. But the fallout didn't stop there. My dad called the next day. I didn't answer. Then came the email. "This isn't how families solve problems. You've embarrassed us. Your mother is heartbroken." I stared at the screen for a while before closing it. Because that was the truth, wasn't it? My family wasn't upset that Nolan had stolen from me. They were upset that I'd spoken up, that I hadn't played my role, that I'd stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight. And they didn't know what to do with a daughter who wasn't willing to stay small anymore. After the phone calls stopped, the silence was somehow louder. My inbox was full of media requests, podcasts, tech blogs, even a morning show. But my family? Not a word. Nolan went dark. My parents, who had never missed a chance to remind me to be respectful and keep the peace, had nothing left to say now that I'd defied both of those in one public act. The lawyer from Eco Forward finally reached out. A polite email, drenched in legalese, proposing a private resolution and asking for a meeting to discuss the matter constructively. I forwarded it straight to my attorney. I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. I was looking for acknowledgement. Real, undeniable proof that I existed. That my work mattered. That I mattered. But with every win in public, I felt the gap with my family widening. Then, one morning, I opened my door to find a box. No return address, just my name handwritten in blocky, familiar letters. Inside, there was an old notebook, one I'd thought was lost years ago. My engineering sketchbook from high school. Every crude drawing, every early idea, every note on materials, angles, airflow, all there. On the first page, my name was written in pencil. Underneath it, a sticky note. "You were always brilliant. We just didn't know how to handle it. Mom." For a moment, I just sat there, holding something I had created, something that proved I'd been someone long before the headlines. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Still, the message wasn't from Nolan. He hadn't said anything since the night he accused me of ruining him, until the article announcing the patent suspension dropped. That's when I got the message. "You win. Happy now?" And suddenly, I felt none of the triumph I thought I would, because I hadn't won. I'd just reclaimed what had always been mine. And Nolan wasn't the only one who had to sit with what he'd lost. That weekend, I visited my parents' home, for the first time in over a year. Mom opened the door, eyes red, smile unsure. "Your father's in the garden," she said, stepping aside. The house looked smaller somehow, more tired. The framed photos on the wall still told the same story. Nolan's awards, Nolan's graduation, Nolan shaking hands with tech CEOs. My face only showed up once, in a Christmas group photo, half cut off. Dad was pulling weeds when I approached. He didn't look up. "You came," he muttered. I nodded. "I didn't come to argue." A long pause. Then, "You embarrassed this family." "No," I said. "I told the truth. You're just embarrassed it had to be public." He stood, brushing dirt off his hands. "We raised you better than this." "No," I said again, quieter this time. "You raised me to stay quiet, to support Nolan, to never outshine anyone." For a moment, we both stood there, facing the truth neither of us could ignore. "I never meant to make you feel invisible," he said. "But you did," I replied. "And I won't be invisible anymore." He didn't argue. He just looked at me, really looked, and nodded, slowly. That was the closest thing I'd get to closure, and it would have to be enough. By the time the national conference rolled around, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't walking on stage to prove anything to my family anymore. I was doing it for every kid who'd ever been asked to dim their light so someone else could shine. I was doing it for myself. The room was packed. Engineers, students, venture capitalists, government officials. But when I stepped up to the podium, all I could see in my mind was the worn carpet in my childhood living room, my father's disappointed eyes, Nolan's smug smile, and then, just beneath all that, the quiet persistence of the girl I used to be. I began. Innovation isn't born in comfort. It's born in pressure, in doubt, in being told you can't, and choosing to anyway. The audience fell silent, tuned in. I told them about my path, not just the patents or the labs, but the rejection letters, the family dinners where my voice got talked over, the school awards no one showed up to clap for. I told the story of my first prototype, a filtration system I built in college that Nolan repackaged for his startup. How my parents celebrated his ingenuity while I stood off to the side, hands still stained with soldering paste. I didn't name names, but I didn't need to. The room heard every word. And then I told them about boundaries, about how walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop asking people to believe in you and start believing in yourself louder. The standing ovation was surreal. People waited to talk to me, not just about the tech, but about the story. Several women cried. One man in his 60s said, "I wish my daughter had heard this before she gave up engineering." I told him, "Send her the link." Later that week, a well-known venture fund reached out. They wanted to back my ideas. My own startup. No Nolan, no family name leverage, just me. And still, despite the progress, the closure, the new doors, I kept thinking about the old ones. That's when I saw the post. Nolan had quietly shut down the startup, publicly blamed economic downturn. But in the comments, people were asking questions about ethics, about stolen tech, about that sister he never mentioned. Then I got a text. I saw the speech. "You were always better than me." Nolan. I stared at it. No apology, no request for forgiveness. Just 7 words that finally said what he never could, that he knew. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I was already gone, already growing, already building something beyond the reach of their validation. Sometimes we think closure comes when the other person says, "I'm sorry." But sometimes it comes when you no longer need them to. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family? Risk everything just to be seen, to be heard, to be you? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. And if you're into real-life family drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.